How we doing, guys? DG Trading 101 here, back with another audio blog. And today I want to talk about how to improve your fundamental research capabilities. And I'm not going to hold your hand here and walk you through how to read an SEC filing in this post. Sorry if that's what you were expecting. However, I will leave you with an actionable guideline on how to accomplish just that, and some insight on how your mentality should be when you are doing this research and the type of questions you should be asking yourself during it. I would say that this is probably up there with, it's probably surpassed at this point the most common question I know, at least that I get in my DMs after people asking, I have discipline issues, or what's your favorite setup, things of that, the common ones, all the big ones. That right after that is, how do you read an SEC filing? Or, hey, I was looking at this, this shelf and I noticed this. What do you think about that? And that's really probably not going to be your best way to go about this. Just kind of pinging random people that you think understand filings and hope that they're going to help you. I'll save you the time. They're not going to help you 99.9% of the time. For a number of reasons. Probably firstly and foremost, it's extremely time consuming. Learning fundamental analysis, it's very time consuming. So they probably just aren't going to take the time to do it because it's not something that can be conveyed over a direct message, right? It's hours and hours of conversation. So that's first and foremost. And the second is it's actually pretty hard to be, very fluent in understanding SEC filings. I know a lot of people think that they understand it, and they, anybody can pull up a 424B5 and hit Control F and look for warrants and, that stuff. And that takes 5 minutes. And then, you think you're doing your DD. That's not even close to what it really is. That's just the very, very tip of the iceberg. Anybody who's really fluent in this stuff and truly understands the way fundamental analysis research works does this for hours on end. And I'm talking about reading filings until your eyes bleed, reading them nonstop for literally 5, 6, 7 hours a day sometimes, or more even. I know people do it even longer than that. And, it has to be that way because usually in order to find the real nuggets in a filing, they're usually buried somewhere, right in the middle. The shady investment banks that are involved with these offerings, for the most part, in small cap land, they're very proficient at taking the things that they don't want you to see and hiding them somewhere in the middle of a whole bunch of verbal diarrhea, right? It's like a filing can be literally 80 pages long, an offering or a shelf or something like that can be massive. It's just filled with all this, bullshit, for lack of a better word. And there's probably only a couple paragraphs in there that really mean anything. And it's your job to go find them. And, it's a difficult process. It's like kind of like hide and seek, but it's difficult. So again, the whole point of laying that out like that is to say that this is not something that's just going to happen. You're not just going to be able to DM somebody and get an answer to your question and figure it out. It's something that is, I like to put it as, it's something that is learned, not taught. If you're really lucky and you personally know somebody who's fluent in this stuff, then good for you. Pick their brain. But for the majority of you out there who don't know anybody who's, who can help you with this, you're not going to find some random person that's going to do it for you. So you're going to have to do it. And that's the point of this post today. I'm going to try and give you an idea of how to go about doing that and teaching yourself, so to speak. Oh, and also, before we go any further, I just want to make a quick comment that fundamental research is not the end-all, be-all either, guys. Some people take this stuff and they're so focused on it, they think it's all that matters. They say screw technicals and all that. Don't do that. Anybody who strictly trades on fundamentals is an idiot, and anybody who strictly trades on technicals is an idiot. personally, in my opinion. I think you're extremely ignorant if you ignore either side of the game there, because they're both very important, and the people who do it best are the ones that can marry them, in my opinion, because it's a perfect example right now in the current market we're in, and all this weed craziness and all these runners that have been popping up, and when the low floaters start to go crazy, fundamental research is absolutely useless, right? If I heard one more person tell me that Tilray is garbage because their market cap doesn't justify their revenue, I was going to throw my monitor out a window. Like, no shit, Sherlock. Like, we know. Like, Kron, all these names. Like, they're crap. Like, we know, right? But it's just, there's situations where it just doesn't matter, right? So that's why I want you to understand that you really need to be proficient in both of these things. Fundamental research and understanding technicals. I think the only real way to stay safe and be consistent, in my opinion, is to marry them both. So with that said, okay, fundamental research. What are we doing? How do we do it? So step one, as I kind of said earlier, is really to stop pestering people, right? Will you teach me how to get better at this? Will you explain to me what this is? Don't do that. Don't bother your favorite traders and ask them for help with fundamentals and filings. You're not going to get anywhere with that. So, and again, like I said, the thing with fundamental research for me, what I noticed at least, is it's really something that's learned more than it's taught. You're going to pick a lot of this up on your own. And I want to make that very clear. You should really understand that first and foremost. And really, by that, what I'm saying is that, nobody's going to sit down with you and go over a step-by-step guide. Like, okay, Johnny, here's an S1. Write the definition down. And, now let's go look at 3 examples of S1s and all the terms in there so you can understand it better, right? It's not going to happen like that. It's not how you're going to learn this stuff. There's no book about it. You really kind of teach it to yourself. And I'll explain more how to do that in a few minutes and how I personally went about doing it in the beginning. Oh, also another thought, at least for me, I found out that early on when I was going and asking around for help, hey, what does this filing mean? So on and so forth. I tried that and I got a few people to respond. I'm talking, years ago. But I wasn't really learning anything when I did that, right? If someone gave me the answer, I'd kind of understand it for about an hour or two and felt good about it. But then it kind of went right back out of my head again. At least that's what I noticed. You can't really ask for these answers. You have to go and get them yourself. When you do your own digging and you find your own answers, the information is much more likely to stay with you in any lasting and meaningful manner. And having this stuff spoon-fed to you is very much a band-aid and really an ineffective one at that. You'll make little to no progress with this approach, in my opinion. Okay, and one last thing before we get into the meat of this. I just want to debunk, a myth about fundamental research quickly. First off, this stuff is not rocket science. I often hear people saying that they try it, they try to look into it, and they say, oh, it's so complicated. I don't even understand what I'm reading, or I don't even know where to begin. All these things. But I promise you, it's really not the case. You are either, one, very lazy and expecting something unrealistic in your pursuit of this information, or two, you're just looking in the wrong places with the wrong approach. I'd like to give everyone the benefit of the doubt and assume that it's problem number 2 there, so that you're just looking in the wrong places and not doing it right. So that's the place that I'm going to start from the rest of this post. We're gonna go off of that. Oftentimes if you're reading a filing of a sketchy company, again, like we mentioned earlier, they're usually trying to hide stuff. So the filings will be very long with a lot of nonsense and filler crap in there. And this is strictly and solely to distract the reader from finding the real dirt in the filing that the company is trying to hide. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it's right there in front of you and it doesn't take long. But other times you can be reading for hours until you find what you're looking for. That's the reality of it. And it's all part of the cat and mouse game. So you'll need to develop that skill of sifting through the crap, and which just kind of comes with time. You just get better at it as you do it more. But honestly, at the end of the day, none of it is extremely difficult, right? In the sense that you don't need a PhD or an IQ of 190 to figure out or get good at this stuff, right? You just need to understand the game and understand the fact that, yes, this is indeed a game, and nothing more. You've just got to have a good head on your shoulders, a hunger and desire to figure it out, and a little bit of common sense and determination. And then you really have all the tools you need to be a top tier researcher if you want it bad enough, right? The only thing standing in your way at that point is time, a little bit of work and time. So without further ado, let's start talking about how you can start to chip away at this stuff a little bit. And what's going to be your best friend through this entire process is the concept of reverse engineering. If you don't know what that means, reverse engineering is simply the process of working backwards from a solution to try and figure out the causes that happened before it. So that's the process of being able to make sense of these filings and situations through examining past instances of other filings and situations, right? It's a process of working backwards to reach your desired goal. I'll elaborate on that. So here's how, and this works not only for SEC filings, it can be just for any PR. Like if you're having trouble understanding and digesting, PRs and news in general, you can use that for this as well. So here's how the exercise works. If you have dabbled in this stuff in the past, then you probably, are a small cap short seller, and you're probably familiar with all of the usual suspects, as I like to call them, the XGTIs, ETRMs, DRYs, SSH, CYTR, IDXG, HMNY. There's a million of them. The crap companies. I like to call them in my watch lists the perennial shitbags. So you know them. What I want you to do is go through these names, right? The past chart history of these names, and find the huge mover days, both up and down, right? For example, you can look at IDXG's chart. I pull it up and I say, hey, on 12/7/16, that was the start of a massive 3-day move. What the hell was going on there, right? So now I want to go into the filings and the news and look at everything that was produced around that date, right? What filings were released around that time? What did they say? I can now dig through the filings knowing, okay, this was the start of a massive pump and dump, right? What were the signs? How could I have seen this coming through these filings and PRs? You have everything in front of you now, right? You have all the filings, the PRs, and all the resulting price action that occurred because of these filings and PRs. So now it's just time to kind of work backwards. And that's really the beauty of this process, is that you've already got all the answers that you need, right? How many times do you read a PR in the morning and say, well, I kind of have no idea what that means or how the stock is going to react to this? Probably pretty often, right? Well, when you're using this reverse engineering process, you already have all the answers to the questions, right? We already know that starting on 12/7/16, IDXG went absolutely buck wild and ran from 2 to 20. Now, all that's left to do is read all the literature and the filings and the PRs that were released around that time and try and see if you can figure out why that may have happened. And, you're not always going to find an answer. Sometimes things, can go crazy out of nowhere. But a lot of times you're gonna be able to work backwards and figure this out. This can be done for all run days too, not just the crazy massive ones. Like IDXG's December run. Let's use a different example here and go through the type of questions that you should be asking yourself. Now I'm looking at XGTI's chart from 7/7/16, where it ran a couple bucks and it closed on the highs. So what can we do with this? You should be thinking, wow, okay, that was a really strong move, right? This thing opening, it closed on the highs. So what was PR'd that day that led to this thing, being able to run and keep all of its gains? Why wasn't it weak like most of the other run days, right? Stuff like that, or on 12/19/16, XGTI ran again in a similar manner, but this time it gave almost all of the gains back, So why was it so weak, right? What was said in that PR on that day that caused this thing to be so weak and give everything back? These are the kind of questions that you need to be answering, right? So now you have one day where XGTI closed on highs and another where it closed near lows. So what you do is, you compare the two. Look at the PR from 7.7 and the one from 12.19, and you say, what was similar about these? What was different, right? Why do you think one closed on highs and the other gave up nearly all the gains back? Were there any other filings in play around the time, of the second PR that weren't there for the first one? Could there have possibly been dilution going on? If so, where do you think it came from? Questions like that. It's going to require you to do some critical thinking and analysis. But again, none of this is all that difficult, in the traditional sense. Like you can comprehend it all. It's not rocket science. It's just going to take quite a bit of, work and dedication, right? You need to tell yourself that from the start that, I can do this. I can figure this out. It's just going to take some work, and that'll be a little easier, I think, to make progress and keep motivation in the process. So as you continue to do this and get better at it, you'll start to recognize, it gets easier and easier as time goes on, because you start to recognize patterns and certain things that seem to happen over and over again. Like if you see a stock that's really, really beat down for a while and all of a sudden it just starts to run out of nowhere, there's a good chance that you can say, okay, the first thing you want to do is go and look for previous offerings and see the prices that they offered at. A lot of times these guys will run stocks to let people out from the previous offerings, or if they've got a whole bunch of warrants or preferred stock or something to get off and they need, a certain price to do so. So you can go back and look for those kind of things. Hopefully you're catching my drift on how to do this. What you really want to do is just go find all the big candles on these run days of these crappy companies, both up and down, and really examine them, right? Where did the stock open? Where did the stock close? Trying to figure out if it was strong or weak. And then go digging through the news, right? Already knowing the price action outcome. We already know what happened. We know how the stock reacted. So now what made it react that way? What are we reading, right? And try to marry the PR to the action that took place and the way it did that day and why. And this exercise won't always lead you to SEC filings, right? Sometimes it's often just a PR. Well, I guess technically an 8K filing. But it's not always, right? It's not always an offering or dilution or any of that stuff. It doesn't always have to be in there. But you won't always end up digging through filings, but this exercise will help for everything, right? For news, for filings, just understanding the way stocks move on a fundamental level in general. This is going to be a big help. But oftentimes it will lead you into filings, which is probably the main thing that you want to get better at, right? So my advice would be this: don't just start, generically Googling how to read SEC filings or what is an S1, or you should be Googling that stuff as it pops up in your reverse engineering process, so it's relevant to the current piece of information that you're looking at the time. Because I think a lot of people don't know where to start with this, and they kind of just try and look at everything all at once and just end up overwhelming themselves, and then they just quit. They're like, oh my God, this is way too much stuff, and then they just kind of give up. So if you're in the middle of kind of one of these reverse engineering processes, and you find, a run day where ETRM dropped $3 and closed on the lows, and you see no PR that day, and the only thing that you can find is an S1A that was released, a week or two earlier, then it's time to read the hell out of that, read the whole thing and try and figure out, why. Clearly somebody was selling and diluting, but we know that it's obvious by looking at the chart, but you got to figure out why, right? So then it's time to Google, what is an S1? Read up on an S1, then read the S1, try and find numbers, see where it closed. Where did they stop selling? Was that an important number, right? How far did they let it run? Where did it go? A lot of not much is random in these games. Very, very little is left to chance. These guys really have these things on puppet strings for the most part. So if you see a stock that's, at $2 and all of a sudden it has like a weak run and it runs up to $6, usually there's a reason that it went up to there. That should be one of the main things that you're thinking about in your question and answer process here and the reverse engineering process is keep an eye on levels that the stock goes to, and keep those levels in mind when you're reading the filings around that time to try and put it put it all together. I hope this makes some sense. I'm not going to lie to you and say that it's easy because it's not. It's going to take a long time and a hell of a lot of work and dedication. And again, that's another reason. Like if you ask people about filings, they don't really seem too keen on giving you the answer to the question. And a lot of times that's because finding the real dirt and the real, golden nuggets and the good information is hard work. And it takes a lot of time to do it. And they'll be damned if they're just going to tell it to you, right, who did no work. It's not going to happen. They're not just going to give away golden information to a stranger. It's never going to happen, right? There's a reason that so few people are good at it and have this knowledge, because it is difficult, but it is doable. It really is. So I don't want you to think, well, I'm not a genius, so I'll never be able to do this. That's not true and simply not the case. It's absolutely attainable for the average investor if you just have the desire to make it happen. So don't get discouraged thinking you're not smart enough. You probably are. You just probably lack some direction and maybe real focus. So you really got to buckle down. It's kind of like reading tape. It may not all make sense early on, or it may just seem downright confusing. But as you just keep at it, and it slowly starts to make more sense. And I think you can do it. And again, remember that the beauty of this process is that you already have the answers. You can already see how the stock behaved on those past run days. Now all you have to do is go back and do some investigation work and read the PRs and filings as to why. Right? The days of I have no idea how to interpret the news should be over, because you've already got the price action right in front of you. Now it's just time to work backwards and figure all this stuff out. So this is the way that I began to crack into this world and how I started to learn and read filings and interpreting news. And I truly believe that this is by far the best way to do it. Again, if you aren't lucky enough to know somebody who's extremely good at this and who may be able to shorten your learning curve, if you're just starting and you're by yourself, this is by far the best way to do it. And if you're not doing this, well, then I'm not really sure what you are doing. Probably nothing. You're probably complaining and asking others for help is probably what you're doing. So I would strongly suggest that you give this reverse engineering method a shot. It was an invaluable tool for me, and it taught me quite a bit of what I know today, and I think it can be really helpful. So give it a shot, and good luck.